Welcome to my podcast, Worlds Collide. I'm the host of the show, Victoria Daute, and I talk with my international guests here in the show about the experiences they made in their new country versus their home country. Hey, my guest in today's episode is Erica. And after moving around for a little bit, she ended up in Bali. Let's find out what her journey was and what her life is like in this wonderful place. And also, on a side note, Erica has her own podcast. It's called Self-Help Junkie. And of course, you can find it wherever you listen to podcasts. All right, here it goes. Hi, Erica. Thank you for being on my podcast. How are you today?
I'm doing really well. I actually recorded an episode of my own podcast this morning, so
Okay.
I have to hand over the reins and let you host today.
So you're already in the flow.
Yes, definitely.
Okay, cool. So, where are you calling from?
I am calling today from Indonesia, so I'm on the island of Bali, and most people know it as a tourist destination, but I've actually been living here for 3-4 years now.
Oh, wow. Are you, do you live by the beach?
I live like 500 meters from the beach, but my boyfriend and I have been joking. We're like, we haven't seen the actual beach in months. Like,
Oh, really?
we're not beach people.
Okay. But hey, you would have the possibility to just
Of
go.
course. It's nice to have that option. We're looking at other houses right now and we're like, we want to be close to the beach. And we're like, why? It's like, we never go. It's just nice to have it close.
Yeah, for sure. And where are you from originally?
I'm from Vancouver, Canada, but I've been away for 9 years at this point.
Okay. So why or what brought you to Bali?
Well, my journey is a bit roundabout. I didn't end up here straight from Vancouver. I started off in South Korea. I finished my degree in chemistry
Mm-hmm.
and I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. I knew I didn't want to be in a lab anymore
Okay.
because it's very isolating
Oh,
and you don't get to talk to people. So I went over to South Korea to go teach English and be able to travel for a year. Turned into 2.5 years because I loved it so much.
mhm.
And then when I was done with Korea, the company was actually expanding over to Vietnam. So they brought me over as like an HR operations
Okay.
manager. Yeah. And I was in way over my head. It was a great learning experience,
Uh-huh.
but also not the best working environment. So after that experience, I decided that I wanted to work for myself and do something that I was passionate about
Mm-hmm.
because the company that I was working for, the values just weren't aligned with my
Mm-hmm.
own. And I found more and more that money meant less to me than having a purpose-driven
Yeah,
life.
yeah.
Um, yeah, and that's how I ended up in Bali. I was only going to be here for a month because I didn't know where I wanted to be next.
Mm-hmm.
And I fell in love with the community here.
Oh, okay. And how did you manage to stay?
So I got a online job freelancing for an agency. It kind of brought the two things that I loved from my last previous job. So that was teaching and then developing people into leadership
Mm-hmm.
positions. Like in my HR operations job, I did a lot of that. So I actually work with a lot of people from Meta, Google,
Mm-hmm.
Netflix, and I coach them through communication. And then once I started getting some traction there, I decided, hey, I should do this on my own. So I started my own business. I've incorporated in Indonesia. So that's how I'm able to stay here.
Oh, wow. That's pretty impressive. That's cool. And
Thank you.
how long are you doing this now?
Communication coaching in general, like 3-4 years, so
Okay.
about the time that I've been in
All
Bali.
right.
Yeah,
That's pretty nice. And have you always lived in the same spot?
I've moved around, not too far from here, like maybe 30 minutes around this area, but
Okay.
I've really settled in and I like this area specifically.
Yeah. How would you describe when you first moved to Bali? Like, what were the biggest differences to you? Like, culturally?
I think the biggest shift was moving from Canada to South Korea.
Sure, that was
Right.
already
Right.
big
So I've
difference.
gotten more used to Asian culture. I think what differentiated Indonesia from other places in Asia that I've lived in is probably the religious aspect.
Oh,
Korea is very Christian, but it's in the confines of the church. You don't really see it outside.
yeah.
Vietnam, just religion wasn't really prominent.
Mm-hmm.
Here, it's a lot of Hindu,
Mm-hmm.
so the spiritual aspect, like you've heard of Eat, Pray, Love. Um,
Yeah.
People all come here for that spiritual experience,
Oh,
and
I did not know this.
yeah. So up in Ubud is where everyone goes for like yoga retreats, and you go to like sound heal and do a lot of the spiritual stuff. But
Uh-huh.
the Indonesian people are also very spiritual. There's always some sort of ceremony going on. Like they will
Mm-hmm.
close down an entire busy road and just have a wedding or like have some sort of ceremony where there's like hundreds of people walking down to the beach to pray to their spirits.
Okay.
And then the one that was the most shocking to me is called Nyepi. So on this day, they close everything down. Like you're not allowed to go outside of your house. You're not supposed to use electricity. You're supposed to fast. And the international airport closes down. This is
Oh.
the first time I've heard of an international
Oh,
airport
wow.
closing down. And it's only on the island of Bali. The rest of Indonesia
Mm,
is very Muslim, so they don't care.
I
But here
see.
in Bali, yeah, very unique culture.
Oh, wow. Was that in the beginning or not necessarily in the beginning? Do you think if those big ceremonies happen, is it like really nice or are you kind of annoyed by it because it's maybe
It's
sometimes in the way of,
oh, for sure. It
yeah.
100% gets in the way. And
Yeah.
there's no notice, right? They don't send out a message to everyone like, hey, these roads are going to be closed down. You just are on your way to meet a friend or like to a meeting. And you're like, why is there no movement in this
Okay.
entire
Uh-huh.
road? Because all the roads are really small. It's hard for two cars to pass on a lot of these roads. So if they close down, like, that's it. You can't
Yeah.
really do anything about it. So I think in the beginning, I am much more of a I'm from Vancouver, right? So it's very much like we're getting to A to B. We're not smelling the roses
Yeah.
along
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
way.
Uh-huh.
So I've had to learn that over my time here.
So would you also say that the culture is more easygoing versus,
100%.
yes?
Yeah, I think in general, the warmer the place, the more chill
Uh-huh.
people are.
Yeah.
I first experienced this in Vietnam where you see people just out at a coffee shop for 3, 4 hours, and I'm like, don't you have a job? Like,
Yeah.
isn't your
Why?
boss gonna be worried about you? But their idea of a good life is time spent with community.
Yeah.
And I think that is one of the things that I've appreciated most living
Mm-hmm.
abroad is that sense of community that
Yeah. That's why
is
you
everywhere.
decided to stay in Bali.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. Yeah. I think especially having lived abroad, you make friends so much faster with other expats because
Mm-hmm.
they don't have the same set of friends since high school. So
Yeah.
their schedules are much more free. They don't have really the family
Yeah.
obligations. So you can be like, hey, you want lunch in 20 minutes? And most people will be like, yeah, sure. So you have a lot more freedom with time. And that makes much easier to make community and build
Mm-hmm.
those really quickly.
Yeah. And how did you manage to make friends in
Uh,
Bali?
Yeah, so funny. I arrived here, it was like the third day I'd been here, and I was like, I don't know if this is my space. And I
Mm-hmm.
was sitting at a restaurant, and two guys sat 2 tables over from me, and they were like, hey, have you ever been here before? Do you recommend anything? I said, no. And then we just started talking. And
Mm-hmm.
this has happened over and over again where you're at a yoga class and you're just like, hey, do you live here? And they're like, yeah, hey, we both like this restaurant. Why don't we go after a yoga class and have lunch? And then you become friends. Yeah.
I mean, our
Yeah.
listeners, I mean, if they just listen, they cannot see your face. So you are Asian?
Yes.
Yes. So, do people assume that you are sometimes a native?
I It depends on who. So foreigners usually can pick out that I'm not Indonesian.
Uh-huh.
I think most people can either guess that I'm like Chinese, Japanese, something that's not
Mm-hmm.
Indonesian. I think the way that I dress is also quite Western,
Oh,
so
right, right.
they can pick
Mm-hmm.
that out. But Indonesian people, like when I go into a local store, they just start speaking to me, and usually, like, I get some good discounts because of it. Because when you're
Yeah.
in a country that's so homogeneous, this happened to me in Korea, it happens to me in Vietnam, where they're like one of us, like you are Asian, so you must
Yes.
be our type of Asian, because most countries outside of the United States and the UK is like 98% homogeneous, so they're like
Uh-huh.
one of us. So that's worked to my advantage a lot of times, but
Okay.
it does get frustrating because they get disappointed. They're like, you don't speak our language. I'm like, I'm not your people. Like, I'm Chinese. You could be disappointed in me if I'm Chinese. Right.
Do other people get confused too, like in the work environment sometimes?
I work with a lot of people with an Asian background,
Okay.
and so my specialty with communication is cultural barriers, which is,
Oh,
I think, having lived abroad for so long and working
it's very
in
helpful.
different cultures, it's been very helpful
Mm-hmm.
to frame different concepts and be like, because I worked in education in South Korea, I was like, oh, this is how they taught English versus how I was taught in Canada. I can see why you
Uh-huh.
have a different perception when you're talking to each other.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that's kind of where it comes from. I have had to feel like I've had to prove myself because I'm Asian, female. I look younger than my actual
Mm-hmm.
age, and I've gotten a lot of experience that um, maybe it takes longer if you're going about it the straightforward route, like if you just graduate and you
Sure.
work in a Canadian company.
Sure.
Yeah,
Yes.
but I mean, I guess I'm kind of used to it at this point, and I have nothing to
Right.
compare it
Uh-huh.
to. So,
Yeah. And since you moved away from home, how often do you visit?
so I usually go back every other year. My parents usually come to visit me on the years
Oh,
that I
that's so
don't.
nice. Mm-hmm.
Exactly. And it's been nice for them to kind of experience my life and get a glimpse into how I'm living. And I think it also makes them a little bit more relaxed because they're like, okay, she's eating, she's got
She's good.
vegetables, she's living a comfortable life.
She has a roof over her head.
Exactly. She has caring
Yeah.
people around her.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I
Yeah.
go back every other year except since the pandemic. I haven't actually seen my
Sure.
parents yet. I'm a pretty bad daughter.
Oh,
But they're coming to visit soon.
okay.
But yeah, every time I go home, it's a bit of reverse culture shock,
Right.
right?
Yes. What in particular? Do you have like an
Yeah,
example?
I think, yeah, there's a couple examples. The first one would be that a lot of my friends, because they've only ever lived in our city, when I talk about experiences with like cultural differences or how I live my day to day, it's a little bit surprising to them. They're always asking, like, oh, what exciting thing are you doing? Like, you live in this foreign country. I'm like, I turn on my laptop, I go to work, I
Yeah.
type emails, I eat dinner, and
Yeah.
then I go to sleep. It's wherever
Yeah,
you
you work,
are.
right?
Yeah, it's
You're not on vacation.
no, exactly.
Yeah,
But
exactly. Yeah, but
they imagine that.
that's
Um,
I know. It's my brother always thought that too. Like when that was when before we moved to Texas when we still lived in California.
mhm.
I don't know. They thought like we're on the beach the whole time or like driving on the one and like
Surfing.
yeah, like all this like touristy stuff. We're like,
Right.
no, we're like usually work all the time. We don't do these
We have
things all the
traffic. Like,
time.
it's the same
Yeah.
everywhere you go. Um,
Yes, no, we're having jobs. Sorry. It's not what you think it is.
exactly. But I think that's a big one. And then the other one is that I see so many of my friends doing the same things, like graduating, get a job, climb the corporate ladder, get a mortgage, get married. And I've deviated off that path. And
Mm-hmm.
sometimes it's hard if they're talking about their mortgage all the time. I'm like, I have nothing to relate to you. But I did this
Okay.
cool thing where I go to the gym every day and I tried these new activities, and they can't relate to that because they're like, how do you have
Right. Mm-hmm.
time? I'm trying to pay
Uh-huh.
off my house. So there's some distance there, but I have a couple friends that I keep in touch with regularly, and they're the people who've
Mm-hmm.
also moved away for college or travel internationally, so they can relate a little bit more to my life.
Yeah, you have a little bit more in common.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That is easier to keep the conversation
Yeah.
going, kind of, right?
And I think that's a big thing with the expat community is we all have that same understanding, and we're missing that back home. So it's much easier to make friends. Whereas some of the friends that I know, they have kept in contact with their high school friends, and they have nothing in common with them other than their shared
Yeah.
background. So I get
Yeah.
to talk philosophy or self-help or my personal interests
Yeah.
rather than just built on um, just a lifelong friendship.
Or somehow like you're friends with like somebody who is 20 years older
Mm,
than you, but it's just because you have like kind of the same path.
for sure, for sure. And there's
Yeah.
also lots of variety in there, right? Like we have certain things in common, but there are people who are completely out of left field and other aspects. So it does keep it interesting.
Would you ever consider moving back though?
I It's difficult. I think after living abroad, I can't really imagine moving back to North
Mm-hmm.
America. I think that great school system, I think it's a great place to raise kids, but that's not the life that I envision for myself. I don't think I'll have
Mm-hmm.
kids in the future. So
Mm-hmm.
being able to travel, living in countries that are less expensive, and having community, because a lot of my friends back home, they complain about not being able to meet friends. They're like, we want to have
Mm-hmm.
dinner together. Are you free for Thursday from today? Or
Yeah.
you,
I know. Yes. Yes.
and
Yes.
then
Totally.
something else comes up and it's just so hard to meet up. And if you're not thinking about building a family, you need to build community, and part of that is just availability. Who else is living that lifestyle with you? Yeah.
Yeah. So more like a no.
More no. I think my parents will be disappointed to hear that.
Yeah.
It's also Vancouver is such high housing prices, and I think Vancouver would
Hmm.
be the only place I'd consider moving back to because it's where my family is. I would
Yeah,
like
of
to spend
course.
more time with them.
Yeah. And is there anything that you really miss from?
Hmm. I mean, family and friends, definitely.
Mm-hmm.
Like a lot of my cousins who are around the same age as me right now, they're starting to get married, they're having babies, and I want to be the cool aunt and take these kids
Yeah.
out and knit them sweaters and stuff. And my sister is engaged now and she's thinking of starting a family. So I think that's when it's gonna hurt a little bit more not being
Yeah, I kind of
around.
missing out.
For
Mm-hmm.
sure. But in terms of food, Bali has a lot of Western food, so it's really easy to
Mm-hmm.
do that. Um, yeah, not really. I like the life that I live here. And
Yeah.
I think I missed it more when it was early on in my travels, but 8, 9 years, I've spent my entire
Right.
adult life abroad. So
Yeah.
it's hard to think back because I was a teenager when I was back home.
Yeah. How old were you when you
I
left?
was 23, so I just graduated
Okay.
university.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's still pretty young.
Yeah, still forming
Yeah.
my mind.
So, is there anything that, oh, I'm sure there is, but what would you say is way better in Bali?
Hmm. I think what we've already talked about, like the community, but the weather. So
Oh,
Vancouver
yes.
is such a rainy city. I
Yeah.
remember months where I would not see the sun and see it after 30 days. I was like, oh yeah, that's what the sun looks like. And
Yeah.
I
Totally
always thought
forget.
that I was fine in Vancouver until I came to Bali and it's just sunshine every day. And I was like, oh, this is what it's like to get enough vitamin D to be
Hmm.
happy. Like, I'm pretty sure I had seasonal depression in Vancouver, but that was my entire life, so I didn't know any different. Maybe you wouldn't be able to relate because you were in California and now Texas. Have you ever lived
No,
in
yeah,
a
I'm
place
happy
without?
when I mean, I'm from Germany, so
Mm, you get
it's
it.
also 4 seasons and a
Right,
lot of rainy days for
right,
sure.
right,
But I here now, because the sun is out all the time and it's just hot and humid,
right.
I I'm always happy when it's not sunny. You know, I'm like I'm like happy when there are
Right.
clouds in the sky.
Right. There's a happy medium. I do have to spend like afternoons inside because it gets
'Cause
way
it's
too
hot
hot
too.
otherwise.
Yeah.
But we recently, my boyfriend and I went to Europe for a vacation for 30 days. And
Yeah.
we were like, oh no, we don't have jackets. We don't have pants. Like
You
it was
don't have
so weird
anything.
seeing each other. Like I always see his arms. He's either in a short sleeve or a tank. I'm like, what are you hiding? Why are you wearing sweaters and like all
Yeah.
bundled up? He was freezing. It was only 16 degrees. It was not that cold.
Yeah, but when you're not used to it, then it's kinda cold. And I
Definitely.
think you adjust really fast to temperatures.
For sure.
So, so 16 degrees can be really cold if you're not used to it.
Yeah.
I understand. And, but do you sometimes miss having no seasons?
I have. I definitely have thought about missing that. And then I went home for Christmas one year and I was like, I'm over it. I'm like
Okay.
2 days of snow maximum. I don't need an entire 3, 4 month period because snow is beautiful.
What about fall?
Fall, I like the layers. I like the fashion. I
Mm,
miss like being able to like wear a cardigan and like a scarf, but not enough to be uncomfortable. Like I love being able to walk around in a tank top and shorts all year round.
okay.
Um, yeah, it does get chilly. Like you could use a windbreaker during the rainy season, and yeah, it gets chilly at night. It gets down to like 26 degrees.
That's okay. That's
It's
kinda
chilly.
it's
I mean, it's
chilly.
33 today, so
Oh, yeah, here too. Uh-huh.
relative. Yeah.
But, it's funny, like, I remember in March, we had, like, the first hot day,
Mm.
and everyone was still wearing, like, long pants. They're
Yeah.
like, "I'm not ready yet for shorts. It's too early. We're not wearing shorts yet." Because I know for me, by the end of the summer, I'm like, "I don't wanna put these clothes on
Yes.
anymore. I just
Yeah.
wanna wear, like, I don't know, my fall clothes, you know, I
Right.
wanna wear jeans."
I guess that's one thing. So when you're living in a place with 4 seasons, you have different wardrobes, right? Like you have 3
Yeah,
wardrobes. Whereas here, I just have the same thing year round and I get bored with my clothes real quick.
really fast.
So what I've done is I will take all the clothes that I'm bored with and like put them in a duffel bag. And then 3 months later, I open it up. It's like, oh my gosh, all these things fit me and I like them all again. So I have to play mind tricks with myself.
Yeah, but that works really well.
Definitely.
It's like when you find something in your closet, all of a sudden, "Oh, I forgot about this. Oh, this
Yeah.
is so nice.
Like, who
Oh, I'm gonna
chose
wear
this?
this
Was it
now."
me?
It's like it's like going shopping.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah, yeah, but
Yeah.
we have, at least here it's, 2 seasons. It's like hot and cold, kind of, nothing in between.
That sounds nice though. It's not, at least you get the change and
Yeah, a little change, yes, but it's just
right.
I'm still, like, happy when the summer is over.
What is cold in Texas like? I'm guessing there's no
Um,
snow except that one year when it kind of got crazy.
oh, we have so when, since we moved here 3 years ago, we have snow every year.
You guys
But
brought it.
the maybe. But when we moved here, they said, like, "Oh, it's the first snow we had in 25
Oh my
years."
God.
But, like, now it's like, "Oh, snow every year." For me, it's normal here, I guess.
Right.
But I guess, like, people just don't know how to handle it, you know? Like, here 0 degrees. People freak out. We had 1 week without electricity. It's like, what the fuck's going on? Like, it's
Yeah.
just 0 or -1. It's not even cold. And like the electricity cannot handle it.
Right.
It's
Right.
it's ridiculous.
It was
I
the
don't
same in
know.
Vancouver. So I had friends who are from Toronto and they have much more extreme winters than Vancouver does.
Ah,
And
yeah.
like Vancouver also freaks out. Like remember having snow days because there was like 3 inches of snow and my university was on a mountain, so the buses couldn't get up and we're like, well, guess we're
Uh-huh.
not going to school.
Yeah. Oh, we had that opposite. Oh, no, we had in summer uh days off when it was hot, when it was 30 degrees. Then we had like no
Wow.
school. Or and here it's like when there's like there wouldn't be any
No.
school. Yeah, so I guess it's so different
It is.
everywhere.
It is. Yeah.
So how about the language? Do you speak the language?
I speak very basic. So this is what I've done with every country that I've lived in. I know enough to order food. I know enough to tell a taxi driver where to go. But beyond that, I have not, and I feel bad. But at the same time, especially in the area that I live in, everyone speaks English, so it's not something that is necessary for my day to day. And even when you do try to speak Bahasa to them, they
Mhm.
respond in English because they're like, this is going to be faster if we just do it in English.
And they're pretty good in English.
Oh, very good. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
I,
because I think it's just what I know.
mhm.
That's not much, but it's very touristy with
Oh, yeah.
Australians, right?
Yes. Yes. So if you can
So,
understand an Australian, you'll be able to understand an American with that accent.
yeah.
Um,
So I just meant like in terms of people communicate in English, even the
yeah.
locals. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think the place that actually surprisingly probably had the least amount of English was Korea.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, Even though the population is more educated, they just tend to be very shy with their
Mm-hmm.
English skills.
Okay.
Their English is good, but they
Yeah.
just, in their education, they know how to read, they know how to write, and they know how to listen really well. But
Yeah.
speaking was never really done in the classroom, so they feel very worried about getting it wrong. Whereas I feel like
Right.
in Vietnam and here in Indonesia, they will make mistakes, but their goal is to connect and
Right.
to share stories. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So they're not embarrassed of making
Yeah.
mistakes and the other one.
And that is so helpful for language learning.
Yeah. And would you say there are other big differences between those three countries that you've been to?
For sure. So South Korea was the first place I went to, and it's the most westernized. In
Mm-hmm.
terms of development, they had a boom, so a lot of money coming in, and the city planning is amazing. There are pedestrian walkways everywhere. The
Okay.
public transit is amazing. The culture is more nitpicky. Like they're super efficient. If you want to get a passport, you can get it in 2 days. You need to
Oh, wow.
do any paperwork bureaucratically. It's been the most efficient country that I've been
Oh,
to.
nice.
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah, no, that part I love, but they're also very judgy. I think that comes with like
Mm,
critically thinking about like how to make things most efficient. And that's part of the reason why I left is they're very blunt about appearances. Um, so
uh,
things like when I didn't wear makeup or wore my glasses instead of my contact lenses, my students and even my Korean coworkers would come up to me and be like, "You look better with eyeliner." And
oh, like the female or the male?
females usually, but I've had male students
Uh-huh.
come up to me and be like, "Oh, you look prettier with like your hair curled." I'm like, "Oh, thanks." And like I didn't even get the worst of it. There were some younger students who would go up to teachers who were a bit bigger because Koreans tend to be very skinny. They would go
Mm-hmm.
up, put their hand on their stomach and be like, "Teacher, baby." Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Really?
Teaching in Korea, you get a thick skin fast and you learn to
Uh-huh.
either laugh and take it or you leave. Like there's no
Or
in
you leave
between.
because you cannot handle it.
Right.
Yeah.
But like the culture permeated down to the kids. Like I had middle school students who were gifted double eyelid surgery for their graduation. So
Oh my God, are you serious?
their parents were like,
That
you
is
will
insane.
look prettier if you have this. And this doesn't happen in North America, but you attach your picture to your resumes. So if you have two resumes
Uh-huh.
that are exactly the same, but one person's more attractive than the other, the attractive person is more
Yeah.
likely to get the job. So they're thinking, I want my kid to have every leg up in this very
Right.
competitive
But
society.
still, so
For
superficial.
sure. For
But we have
sure.
that in Germany too. You
Yeah.
apply with the picture.
Right.
I
Yeah.
don't know if you still do it, but 10 years ago, for sure you still did it. Yes.
Right.
I'm sure they still do it.
For sure. It's shocking.
It's normal. There, it's normal. I don't know.
How do you feel about it as someone who's lived in both places?
Um, since I grew up there, for me, that was the normal thing to
Mhm.
do. And when I moved here or I went to school here, and they told me that you not do it, they told me that is because of not to be racist,
Mm,
not judging on the appearance
right,
or the race, but just on the grades.
right, right, right.
And
Mm-hmm.
so yeah, for me it was always
Right,
very
right.
I don't
But
know, I got it. So yeah.
understandable. Korea, you get judged for other things. You get asked what your parents do on your resume and how much they
Wait,
made.
they asked you that on the resume?
Yeah, yeah.
And can you lie? Because
I mean, I guess, but like Koreans, they like to follow the rules. I
mm,
think like the government has a much bigger role to play in the day-to-day lives. I remember when it got really hot one day, I got a text message and I was like, who's texting me in Korean? It I translated it. It was from the government and they're like, "Hey, it's really hot. Old people like stay inside or drink water." So
uh-huh.
they're very much like involved in your day-to-day.
Okay.
So they're much more obedient to the rules.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, less
But that's
questioning.
crazy. And then people judge
Yeah.
about that too, about the income of the
Oh, for
parents. Oh
sure.
my
Oh, for
God.
sure. There's judging
That's
everywhere.
so sad. So how do you have a chance to, I don't know, live a better life?
I mean, I have a lot of my students because well, the kids that I worked with were very privileged. It's
Mm-hmm.
expensive to have a foreigner teacher teach you English. But a lot of them have been abroad for vacations and they see their culture and they're like, there are aspects that I love about it, but I think I want to live abroad and I want to try this other culture. Of course, there's issues with Western culture as
Mm-hmm.
well, but I can see why they want to escape and be in a less competitive environment compared to Korea.
Okay, I see.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. But that's probably the biggest thing with Korea. Like, pretty easy to as like a first place to move to, but there are these downsides. Um, Vietnam, on the other hand, is like the complete opposite. There is no there's no law and order. It
Okay.
feels like Hanoi, where I lived.
Uh-huh.
It's an overgrown village. They haven't figured out that they're a city yet. The roads don't make sense. There's like 100 lakes everywhere, but the people are just so friendly and open. Um, I've been
Mm-hmm.
invited to someone's wedding. I was just driving on the outskirts and going to a different city. Stopped by at a little shack where they were serving lunch. I was having lunch there. The person was very friendly, trying to make conversation with like the smallest bit of English that they had. And they're like, "Oh, my
Mm-hmm.
cousin's getting married today. Do you want to come?" It's like,
Oh.
sure. Like, what an experience. So I think that to me was such a beautiful way of getting introduced to a culture. They're just so open, so friendly. They don't think that people are going to take advantage of them. They
Mm-hmm.
just want to have a good time, and that's important to them.
And was it there where you mentioned that the spiritual
No, that was
things
here
matter more?
in
Ah,
Bali.
that was
Yeah.
in Bali.
But it's
That
very similar in that way. Balinese people are also very friendly and will, like, once you develop that relationship with them, your family, you get invited to these things.
Oh, I meant the you sent this in an email that science, if you talk about science, that the spiritual things matter more than actual facts.
I don't know if that's the Balinese people themselves. I think what we perceive as truth is different. Like I have an Indonesian friend and he was telling me that his sister studied psychology. I was like, that's so cool. And he's like, oh, I can do a palm reading for you. I was like, okay, unrelated, sure. And he's like, oh no, my sister during her psychology degree learned how to do like palm reading and like
Oh.
yeah. And this was very recent. And like to me, that was mind blowing. I'm like, I can't believe they taught like my university had underwater basket weaving, but that was like the zaniest thing that we had. I can't believe they're
Uh-huh.
teaching you like they were using that as a tool for psychology. Yeah.
Huh, interesting. But it's like, I mean, I'm not a professional, but I would say that is not very professional.
I think it's one of those Western mentalities. Like we have science has become the religion of the West, basically. Like we
Yeah.
believe in science. And that's how I was before I got to Bali.
Mm.
And the more I've been here, the more I've understood that there are things that we don't know. We're always making new scientific
Yeah.
discoveries. So I want to leave my mind open to that. I'm not personally going to buy into palm reading, but if that does something for someone, like if that
Sure.
helps someone get over their grief,
Yeah. No,
who am
true.
I to say that that's not valid and that's not a way
Yeah.
for you
No,
to do that? Yeah.
that makes
Yeah.
sense. Yeah.
So
So, and you and your boyfriend, is he
mhm.
also an expat?
He is also an expat. So he is Australian. So he
Okay.
was born in Sydney, but then he moved to America when he was 7. And he was in Connecticut and then moved to California. After graduating university, he went to Shanghai for 14 years and started a business there. So we've kind of had that journey of living in another culture and kind of seeing the best of both worlds, which is something that we really
Mm-hmm.
bond over.
Yeah, yeah. No, I was wondering what language you would speak, but if he's Australian,
Yes,
sure.
English,
Yes,
English.
yes.
It's
Uh-huh.
funny though because I speak Cantonese. My parents are from Hong Kong, and he speaks a
Ah,
bit of
uh-huh.
Mandarin. He's. I've never been to China. He spent 14 years there. I was like, how did I find a
Okay.
white guy who's more Chinese than I am? Like my parents are going to be so proud. Yeah. But I think that's part of why we get along well is he understands Chinese culture and that is a huge part of who I am and how I
Mm-hmm.
operate. Um, so it's easy to come in together. We agree on a lot of values and a lot of ways that things should be done. Um,
Yeah.
I think like a month and a half into our dating, we were just driving around somewhere and we're like, what do you think the judicial system should be like? What do you think prison systems should be like? And we both
Mm-hmm.
went on a rant, and we were very aligned on what we think should happen.
Okay.
Yeah,
Nice. Yeah, nice.
yeah.
Since you have the Chinese background,
Mhm.
would you say that helped you to
Yeah, living in Asia and like bridge over.
culturally kind of, is it a little bit similar in Bali to the Chinese culture?
I don't know if the culture is similar, but I think because Chinese background, and then I saw all of my Canadian friends with their type of culture. I've I was a different person at home than I
Mm-hmm.
was at school. I spoke different languages.
Uh-huh.
I had a different personality, basically. So I think that skill of adapting to my surroundings allowed me to
Mm-hmm.
adapt to the different cultures that I went to. Um, I think that just seeing how different people operate,
Mm-hmm.
I'm able to observe a lot faster than I think my peers. And then I'm able to soften to it and be like, I don't 100% believe in this, but I'm going to do this to make you feel comfortable. And I learn
Mm-hmm.
by immersing myself.
Right, yeah. All right. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thank
It
you for
was
your
really
time.
fun. It's fun talking about this because this is the like a decade of my life. And I reflect on my own about it once in a while, but to have someone else who's never heard about this before ask questions, it's fond memories for me.
Yes. So that was Erica's story from Vancouver to Korea to Vietnam and then finally settling in Bali. So if you have some questions that interest you about moving or living abroad and you think that I should ask that questions to my guests, then please let me know and email it to me. Please reach out at worldscollide123pod@gmail.com or find me on Instagram. And of course, if you think this podcast is worth a listen, then please leave a review. That would help so much with new listeners. So yeah, and of course find all information here in the show notes. And I hope you will tune in next week, Thursday, as always.